Welcome in to the 39th episode of the Southern Boys Sports Podcast. My name is Drew Holland. It's my co-host, Ben Clay.
What's going on, guys?
We are here, episode 39. We talked about an interesting guest that we'd have on here this afternoon, and we have got our main man, J.D Pickell from On3. Thank you for joining us, J.D.
Man, excited to be here. Appreciate y'all having me on, and it's about time for some spring football, man. Appreciate y'all making time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm actually hyped for it. You know, we've been keeping up with pro days throughout the day. Anthony Richardson just threw it off the roof at Florida's pro day and all that good stuff going on. So thank you for joining us. Go check out JD's podcast, The Hard Count, over on On3. Really good show and should be a fun watch if you enjoy college football. JD, let's start with you personally. You played football in college, Cornell alum. Talk about your playing career first, and then how that playing career led into you getting into podcasting, college football coverage, and sports broadcasting in general.
Yeah, man. So it was a pretty roundabout path for me. Like, I always loved college football. Like you said, was fortunate enough to play at Cornell, but there was no major at Cornell that fed into like broadcasting or sports media, sports journalism. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I don't think I want to get into, whatever the next best thing is at Cornell, whether it was like communication or whatever. So I actually studied hotel administration in undergrad, which is like, during my class, it's like, okay, which brand is under Marriott, which brand is under this? Okay, now if you go and serve at a restaurant, what's the front of house, back of house operations? Just like stuff that like had no interest in using, but I'm like, I'm here. This is a good program. I might as well get involved in it. And was fortunate enough after I graduated, I had one more year of eligibility. And so I got into Baylor's grad school and walked on and played receiver there for like 3 months, and then got too many concussions before the season started, had to stop, and was fortunate enough to where the SID, Taylor Bryan, I think he's now at North Texas, I'd met him during like picture day, and he's like, man, what do you want to do when you're done playing ball? I said, I'd love to be in broadcasting. And so he passed my name on to affiliate in Waco is a fan site called Sikkim 365. And They just let me work there. And it wasn't a full-time gig, but just kept coming around, did some post-game stuff with them, was fortunate to get my feet wet on the YouTube side. And so, yeah, man, really roundabout way to where I guess the right clips got to the right people at On3, and was fortunate to get hired on here full time, man. So not an orthodox path by any stretch, but man, living the dream, and couldn't be happier to be with On3.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. We'll jump into some college football talk. We'll start with one team in specific, but in episode 38, me and Ben talked about the futures of Florida State and Texas A&M. Florida State's one of the more intriguing teams through spring ball, and the expectations are high this season, obviously. We wanted to get your take on Florida State, what you see from them this season, Mike Norvell, Jordan Travis, and all those guys, because we talked about them last episode, but we're excited to see your take on them.
Yeah, man, it feels like they've just been building and building and building, and like this is the year where it's all supposed to come together, right? Because Jordan Travis is back, Jared Verse is back, Fabian Levitt's back. They have so many pieces that came back for another year in Tallahassee, and they've sort of gone through the growing pains of the Mike Norvell era. Like they've trusted the process more or less. And so this year, the expectation, I think, is super clear for them. It's like, hey, we are going to win the ACC, make the college football playoff, or nothing else is acceptable. And so for me, I think they have every tool to do it. I'm just curious to see if they have enough depth defensively to be able to compete with those schools like a North Carolina, if they get into a shootout, or a Clemson if they have a new high-powered offense. But I mean, they're right there, man. So I'm excited to see what they do, but definitely going to be a force. And for them, this is really, this is the year for them where it's all supposed to come together. So a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations for them in Tallahassee.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've talked about over the past couple of days, and over the last episode, was Jared Verse. Obviously, transferred up from the FCS level, had a pretty good season, really good season last year. And I think when somebody sees one good player on defense, it kind of sets the tone for the whole defense. So if you look at Jared Verse, somebody who doesn't watch a ton of college football, say they've got a good defense, they got this kid named Jared Verse, right? They've got Greedy Vance in the secondary. They've got some guys who are able to play, but like you said, that could seriously be a problem because it's not always just that one player who sets the tone for the whole defense. Obviously, I'm a Tennessee fan. I saw that last year with a lack of depth in the secondary. So no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's going to be wild, man. I'm excited to see if they can hold up because they've got they got a lot of pieces. Like they have so many guys that should fit the mold, but can they actually step into that in 2023 and actually hold their water throughout the duration of 12 games? That's going to be the determining factor for me. And can can Jordan Travis take yet another step as their quarterback? I mean, if they can be, I've said this a couple times on our show, like if they can be right around 40 points a game. I think they were like 35 a season ago. If they can just have a slight uptick in production there, I think that's going to be what they need offensively.
Do you see? This isn't really one of the questions we had planned, but the more we talk about it, the more I kind of, draw similarities. Can you see a similarity between last year's Tennessee team and this year's Florida State team? Talking about a quarterback who had a pretty good 2022, down for a big leap in 2023, returning coach who didn't have he had a solid season last year, but a really good season here in 2023. Maybe not across the board similarities, but some spots there that maybe you could draw, similarities to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in terms of how they're teeing it up, right? Just like you said, Hendon Hooker, it was kind of the buzz about, okay, well, it's all sort of set up to, could he take that leap? Is he able to make that next step? And obviously did in a huge way. The one thing that I'm curious about is I think Florida State is maybe a little less quarterback friendly than Tennessee's offense is, just because so much of what Josh Heupel did is like, let's spread it out, go win on the outside, and give him a good ball. Whereas Jordan Travis and Florida State, I think they'll be a little bit more run to set up the pass. But no, without a doubt, in terms of how they're trending going into this year, I mean, there's definitely a lot of correlation between Hooker and Travis, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So moving on to another team, Oklahoma. They're my favorite team, and I've seen you cover them a few times. So for the outlook this year with Venables at coach, we had a great recruiting class. Do you expect us to turn back into a 10-win team, or just we keep on up climbing,
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I really do. There was 4 games last year that y'all lost by 1 score? Like there's so many times where you're like, man, this close. And Oklahoma's a different team if half those games go a different direction. But no, I mean, absolutely. I think for Oklahoma, I'm just very curious to see how much they're able to upgrade on the defensive side of the ball. They did a lot in the portal. I mean, I'm sure they got a lot of guys. Hassan McCall is a guy I'm super excited about. They crushed on the recruiting trail. They've been active in the portal on other spots in the defense. So if they can just be better on the defensive line, I think Dylan Gabriel's a stud. I love Jeff Lebby. I think Jaleel Farouk is a beast. So there's a lot of ingredients offensively where they can be really good. But if they can get over the hump defensively and just have a little bit more in the trenches, I think 10 wins is very, very realistic. And they were close a season ago. I mean, we're talking about Florida State, and they were, I think, number 11 ranked team going into the bowl game, or they were top 10-ish. Mm-hmm. And Oklahoma's stride for stride with them. And so I don't think Oklahoma's in this spot where they're going to have to really wait a long time for Brent Venables to find his footing. I think Oklahoma's going to be in a spot where they can make some noise this coming season for sure.
So the question I'll follow up with, I guess, with that is, what are the expectations for Venables if you're Oklahoma? Is it kind of 9-10 wins or bust, or continue that climb and maybe the next few years getting it up on the hot seat, or what are the expectations in Norman?
Yeah, man, it's kind of a tricky spot because they're going to the SEC next year. And so, there's only so much ramp-up time you get, especially at a place like Oklahoma where the resources are what they are and the brand is what the brand is and they recruit so well. And so I think the expectations are, hey, next year we want to see a significant uptick in terms of 9-10 wins is, I think, very realistic, especially because there were so many games where, like I just said, they were so close. If it were a situation where Oklahoma is just out to lunch, losing by 3 scores every other game, it's man, well, we might need to have a little more patience here. But I think, like you said, recruited well. They've got a lot of pieces. 9-10 wins feels like it's very achievable. And the reason why I say it's got to happen next year is because if you're going to the SEC and I'm a recruit and I'm seeing, let's say they go win 7 games next season. Yeah. I'm okay, so you won 6 games the first year, 7 games the next year. Now you're going to go play in the SEC, and this is his 2nd year ever as or I guess now going into his 3rd year ever as a head coach. I need something to buy into if I'm a recruit. So no, but to answer your question, I think it's got to be around double digits to keep the good people in Norman happy, I would imagine.
Yeah. We'll stay with Oklahoma. I got one more question on Oklahoma, and then we're going to transition to the SEC. But Last question here on OU. Last question in Norman. Jackson Arnold, right? One of the best quarterback recruits coming into this year's class. Up there with the names of Nico Imaliavella and all those guys. What are the expectations for Jackson Arnold? How is he going to progress into a star quarterback at Oklahoma? He's got a year to sit behind Dylan Gabriel. He's got a year to be in Jeff Lebby's system, who's proved to be one of the best quarterback-friendly offensive coordinators out there, producing some guys like Matt Corral at Ole Miss and stuff like that. What's the progression going to look like for J.A. to become one of those first-round picks, blue blood names at the quarterback position in college football, coming up?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. There is so much to like about the fit for him, just because, like you said, was so highly recruited. But in the system he's playing in, you kind of comp the Josh Heupel and Jeff Lebby offense in a similar fashion, like up tempo. We're going to run the football, and then our guys got to go the outside. And so I think for him, it's just going to be a matter of really committing to getting comfortable in that scheme. I think the scheme itself is tailor made for what he can do. I mean, he's a good athlete as well. They're going to ask him to run the football. And so I think what I would love too, and a lot of it honestly depends on Dylan Gabriel. Can Dylan Gabriel be in a spot this year to where he's able to, kind of bring Jackson Arnold along under his wing and kind of show him the way to do it? And then at the same time, he's got to play well enough to keep the pressure off of the coaching staff to be like, hey, do we need to put Jackson Arnold in the game? Is Dylan Gabriel able to stay healthy? All that. So I think to answer that question simply, it's committing to learning the system, and then also being able to really have a good model from Dylan Gabriel to learn it under. So, but no, I'm excited, man. Like you said, tons of ability, tons of tools. 5-star kid by, I believe, just about every other service. He's going to be a dog in Norman if they can cater to him on the outside and have some pieces around him.
Yeah, certainly. Let's go to the SEC and let's stay at the quarterback position. Okay. I dropped a clip over on Southern Boy Sports Twitter. We talked about it. I think it was 2 episodes back. We talked about Graham Mertz, right? We talked about quarterback competitions, bring storylines, and I've been and will continue to be pretty high on Graham Mertz, right? One of the guys I follow pretty closely on Twitter about Florida athletics is Nick De La Torre. Not sure if you're familiar with him, but he drops a lot of clips from Florida camp and all that good stuff. I've watched that pretty closely. I like what I see from Graham Mertz. And although obviously Wisconsin had some tough times, didn't play his best ball last year, suffered some injuries, I'm high on him this year. Are you in that same boat, or do you have questions about Graham Mertz and Billy Napier at Florida?
Yeah, man. Well, one, Nick De La Torre is the man. Actually, that's my guy. He is a publisher, I believe, for our site, Under on 3 at Gators Online for Florida. So he's the man. I talked to him a fair amount to get intel on the good things going on in Gainesville. But no, yeah, Graham Mertz is so fascinating because Billy Napier played quarterback himself, and it sounds like they had a pretty rigorous grading system when they were evaluating guys via the portal. And there was a lot of names that got thrown out there, like Grayson McCall was a name that got thrown out there, Devin Leary got thrown out there. And for Graham Mertz to be the guy they ended up with, I think speaks volumes to how highly they think of him as a staff. The concern, obviously, is the lack of production and maybe the number of turnovers he had when he was at Wisconsin. But if you look at what Florida did a season ago, like how different are they from a wins and loss perspective if they just get more consistent quarterback play? Like Anthony Richardson is an action figure. Like y'all were talking before we got on here, he's throwing the football through the ceiling of the indoor. Like people shouldn't be able to do that. That's ridiculous. But if he's able to just be like consistent week in and week out, I don't know if they have the losses that they did. I mean, we have one game where he's throwing like 400 plus against your Vols, and the next game he's throwing like 66 yards against Missouri. And I'm like, I need you to be somewhere in the middle, which I think Graham Mertz could be for them. So, I mean, if they could just get not like a 10 out of 10, but if you can be like a 7 every week for us, man, we're going to hand the ball to Etienne, we're going to hand the ball to Montrell Johnson, and we're going to be in good shape. So, to answer your question, I think Graham Mertz could be maybe not what Gator fans were necessarily wanting when the portal opened, but I think he could be closer to what they need to be successful in year 2 under Napier.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, after the transfer of Hendon Hooker, after the transfer of a couple other guys, especially in the NIL, heavy transfer portal area, I think the idea of a transfer quarterback has been skewed just a little bit because people will come in expecting someone to just light it up, transfer, progress a lot. And although Hendon Hooker was in a very quarterback-friendly offense, progress a lot, be up for the Heisman and all this. But Graham Mertz could just be a solid quarterback get Florida over that hump, and maybe lead them into that next era at Florida with a better quarterback. Maybe that's just me, but I think people's expectations of a transfer quarterback have been skewed with the NIL and transfer era.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. And like you said, I mean, what they ask of him will be curious too. Like, I don't think it'll be a thing where, like you're speaking to Hendon Hooker and Caleb Williams, another guy obviously that transferred. Like, those guys got put in situations where it was like, hey, we are a quarterback-driven system. Caleb Williams, you got to have 300 yards, or we may not win today. Or Hendon Hooker, we're going to ask you to throw it 30 times. A lot of them will be downfield. You got to make some plays. Where Graham Mertz's going to be, hey man, hand the ball off, hit a couple play action shots. When those safeties creep up, hit the deep shot. But outside of that, like we don't need you to be Superman here. We just need you to drive the bus here a little bit for us. So yeah, I'm curious to see what they ask of him. Because I don't know they have those playmakers on the outside just yet. I know Nick DeLatorre is super high on Andy Jean, and he's going to be a guy, it sounds like. But yeah, very, very curious to see what happens with him this spring. It sounds like it's going to be a pretty open competition between him and Jack Miller right now. So I'm curious, like, how long does that stretch for? How long does Napier allow it to stretch for? Because I think Graham Mertz came to play, right? But we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of answered my question, or whatever you want to call it there. They just simply don't have the playmakers that a team that Caleb Williams had at USC, right? This Heisman candidate season where he transferred from Oklahoma. He got Jordan Addison, Mario Williams, all those guys to transfer in. Tennessee, they get Hendon Hooker. They've got Jalen Hyatt, who transferred from USC. They got Cedric Tillman, both draft prospects. And Ricky Purcell's good. Like you said, Anthony Jean's been coming along pretty well. But I like you said, I think you've got a young running back in Trevor Etienne who you want to develop. I think you've got a solid offensive line that you can run behind at this point. And I don't expect Mertz to air the ball out, but I think he's going to be expected to throw the ball just a little bit more than he did at Wisconsin, because they had a guy like Braylon Allen. He was a developed running back. He was consistently an all Big Ten player. Trevor Etienne's a solid back. Is he at that level of all SEC, widely known name? Not at this point. So maybe Mertz is seen or forced to throw the ball a little more than he was at Wisconsin, but that's something that I'm excited to watch. So, yeah, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah. So moving on to another little QB battle. We got one at Missouri with Brady Cook and the Miami transfer, Jake Garcia. Do you think it's still Brady Cook's team, and do you think Jake Garcia has a shot?
I think it is still Brady Cook's team. It's always interesting whenever you bring in a caliber of a guy like a Jake Garcia, because I mean he was big time when he got to Miami. So if I'm Brady Cook, I'm like, wait, I thought this was my job. And Jake Garcia is like, bro, I didn't come here to sit the bench. Like, what's up? I'm trying to play. So I think it'll be a healthy competition. I do think it's Brady Cook's job to lose. But that'll be a fun battle, man. They got some weapons to it, Missouri. That's going to be an interesting one to watch. That's a sneaky one too. Like, everyone wants to talk about Bama and Georgia, but I mean Missouri now, they got some guys in that quarterback room. But I do think it's Brady Cook's job to lose.
Yeah, and I mean I know Jake Garcia went to Miami. Obviously didn't end up how he wanted. Tyler Van Dyke's taken the job and done pretty well with. I know you're high on Miami's quarterback room. You talked about that. I watched that. So talk about Tyler Van Dyke. We'll make this segue to Miami. Talk about Tyler Van Dyke, what he brings to Miami, and what has willed him to stay as a consistent starter, even though his numbers haven't been up there with the best in the ACC.
Yeah, it's curious because last year, was just a significant drop. I know it was hurt too, but just a significant drop off production-wise after they switched coordinators. And so maybe you heard me talk about this in the video, but I was like, man, either, one of two things happened. Like, either Tyler Van Dyke just kind of had a fluke season in 2021, and that 25 touchdowns, 6 interception year was kind of just like, hey, got lucky. Or, he got into a new system, and the system was the issue, and Tyler Van Dyke's a talented quarterback, but, like, we're not putting him in a spot to be successful.
Right.
I tend to think it's more so the latter situation I mentioned. So I think, whether you want to pin it on Josh Gaddis, you want to pin it on other playmakers, it sounds like right now they're really excited about how it fits him with this new OC and Shannon Dawson coming over from Houston. Going to be a little bit more air raid. They'll have some power run concepts too, it sounds like, to maybe take some things off his plate. But the thing that's exciting for me is everything they're talking about with how much offense they've already installed during spring ball. It sounds like they have like 90% of it in, which I'm sure y'all know, like, that's not really how it goes in spring football. Like, you're supposed to sort of ease into it, and they're like halfway through spring practice, they're like, 90% of the playbook in. So that tells me, okay, the playbook itself isn't super complex to teach. And so if it's not complex to teach and learn, then it shouldn't be that complex to take to the field, which means like, hey, we can just kind of play free. We can let our guys make plays. I'm concerned about how much help he has on the outside. I don't know if there'll be like an alpha playmaker wide receiver for them that they have in house right now, I guess. There'll be a second portal wave. But yeah, I mean, I think Tyler Van Dyke's a guy. I love that he's staying at Miami. I love that he's seeing it through. And I think this offense, it sounds like at least, could be a really good fit for him because last year just didn't seem like it was.
Yeah, and I mean one of the I guess not funny, but one of the craziest things that you said while you were talking about that was the second portal wave, right? I mean, nobody is really out of it. Even talking right now, like you can talk about a team right now, and then at the beginning of August, we always do expectations of each conference. So we talked about Florida State, but I told Ben, they get a transfer in and it can just completely change the face of this team. They bring in somebody who can change, and then the expectations are already skewed. So it's always crazy in spring ball, especially with the new transfer portal era. But let's go to another quarterback battle. We're peppering you with the QB battles.
I love it, man. I love it.
Let's go to Athens, where you've got a three-way battle for Kirby Smart. A lot of highly rated guys. You got Vandegrift. You got all these guys. Beck. We saw Beck play in the national championship game when it obviously was just a blowout. So maybe that says something. Do you have anything on this Georgia QB battle?
Man, it's so interesting because I feel like they just keep it so close to the vest, right? Like Kirby Smart's we're not going to know who the starting quarterback is until he decides to tell us or they trot somebody out there game one. We had David Pollock on the show, which I'm sure he probably gets more access than the average Bear does with him being, an alumni of Georgia. And he was telling us, he's like, I think it's Carson Beck's job to lose. And you would expect him then to talk about, Brock Vandegrift kind of being in that second spot because he's been there a little bit longer. But he said Gunnar Stockton's the truth. So I can't speak with too much authority to that battle. But obviously, I mean, when you're at Georgia, you got some dude with a lot of stars next to his name, and you just won 2 national titles with a walk-on quarterback. Not to knock Stetson Bennett, like should he have been a walk-on? Probably not. But like if you're doing that with a walk-on quarterback, you got either Carson Beck, who was a 4-star, Brock Vandegrift with a 5-star, Gunnar Stockton was a 4-star. Like they're gonna have the competition, I think, breed and have the iron sharpen iron. It's gonna breed the right guy for the job, if that makes sense, because it'll be demanding, but to the same token, like we talked about with Miami, what they don't have on the outside, like Georgia went to the portal and got some dudes with Dominique Lovett and Ra Thomas, and they got Brock Bowers. I mean, it's stupid. Like I fully believe, boys, any one of us could step into that role and be able to like win a few games for them. So whoever they end up getting, I think it'll be a good deal. But I can't tell you. I would bet Carson Beck if I were a betting man. How about that?
Yeah. Well, one of the guys, we'll stay with Georgia. I got another question on the Dogs. We saw a couple guys who probably wouldn't play in the national championship if it was a 24-21 game. But we saw guys like Branson Robinson, and we saw guys like that get a lot of action, and they looked really good. So bringing in guys like Ra Thomas from Miss State, Dominic Lovett from Missouri, they lose A.D. Mitchell, which was a little bit odd. But who is your kind of not breakout star, but one of your breakout guys to watch for this Georgia team? Because they've got the blue blood names like Brock Bowers, Ra Thomas, all those guys that got baggage. Who's one guy that you could see kind of busting on the scene this year and leading Georgia to another college football playoff semifinal game if that's where the tide blows?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. I think with what they did a season ago, playing 2 tight ends so much, I don't think they'll be maybe in the same – how do I say this? They had a dude who was 6'7", 280 playing tight end for them last year, which is 6 offensive linemen on the field. Cool. They have a freshman – as a freshman last year, but a sophomore this year, Oscar Delp, who was a stud. I know he played a little bit last season when it was I believe he played in the college football playoff game against Ohio State when Darnell Washington went down. But all that's to say, you can only give Brock Bowers so much attention before somebody else hurts you. And so I think they'll have a lot of 2 tight end sets on the field still, and I think Oscar Delp will be a guy that we start talking about a lot more with how much attention Brock Bowers gets from these defenses. I mean, he's a great receiving tight end. Our scout here at On 3, Charles Powers, one of the best, and he's really high on Oscar Delp. So I think he'll be a guy that makes some noise in terms of just the mismatch he is for those smaller DBs that just can't match up with big dudes who can run, which is what Oscar Delp is.
Yeah, and I mean, last year, I was pretty high on Lad McConkey as a receiver at Georgia.
Yeah.
Obviously, not a lot of people were. I mean, they've got guys like A.D. Mitchell, Darnell Washington, all these draft prospects. Lad McConkey's just going to get lost in the shuffle this year. Another loaded class of receivers comes in. Dominic Lovett. We've talked about him a couple times now. I like Lad McConkey to kind of be someone that goes under the radar just a little bit because I like Lad a lot. He caught a lot of touchdowns for Stetson last year, and he's been in the offense. So without asking, there's my breakout prospect.
Yeah, man, that's impressive. You were on the Lad McConkey train a season ago. A lot of people are starting to get on it now, but I mean, you were on it before last year, and he did what he did the season. I mean, that's impressive, bro. Heck yeah, I love it. Call your shot, baby.
So moving on to some head coaches here. For these like first year head coaches, new team, who do you think this year could be like the next Sonny Dykes and somehow lead a team far at all?
That's a good question, man. I'm trying to think who we even have. We got Rule, we got Prime. Who else we even got in this mix? I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm really fascinated to see what Matt Rule does. I mean, I don't think it'll be a year one thing.
Yeah.
But just with the way that he does things, he was who I was coached by when I was at Baylor. And I would just say this. I think he's exactly what Nebraska needs. He's structure, he's culture, he's a way of doing things, he's discipline. And we talk about how many like close games Nebraska lost over the last couple of years. It's like, man, is the attention to detail like maybe that much more to where you can, win those games. I don't know if it'll be year one, but I think if you give him 3 years, Nebraska's going to be flirting with a double-digit kind of season. I really believe that, just the way that he does things. So year one, man, that's a great question. I don't know if there's anybody year one where I'm thinking they could make as much noise as Sonny Dykes did last year, but
for sure.
Rule's the guy I'm watching. I'll just say that. I think Matt Rule at Nebraska is going to be a really, really good fit long term.
Yeah. And, we talked about it. I can't even remember, all this spring football. We talked about Matt Rule, and I said, like you said, he coached you at Baylor. In that first year, he kind of just worked with what he had, right? He's going to be working with what Scott Frost and the interim over there, Mickey Joseph, I believe, and all these guys had what they put. He brings in Jeff Sims from Nebraska, who I've seen people be pretty high on. I think Casey Thompson's still the guy probably over there, but Matt Rule has just been such a slow grind head coach who's led teams to be really good, right? Did it at Temple. His first year, I think he went 2-10, and he won back-to-back AAC championships. Went on to Baylor, won maybe 5 or 6 games, then moved on and won 9-10 games, then got hired at the NFL level. Obviously, that didn't work out too well, but he's back here at Nebraska. I think he's got a talented enough team to win 4, 5, maybe 6 games. Because if he can, like you said, if he can close that gap of those really tough losses to teams they probably shouldn't have lost to down the stretch, I think they're a team that can win 5 or 6 games. And I'm not completely out on Nebraska this year. So certainly.
Yeah, man. If they could just get better in the trenches, like, golly, I think I was hearing him talk about it during spring is like spring press conference, whatever it was, and he's like, there were 4 times where we have the lead go into the fourth quarter, and like we just can't pick up enough first downs, can't make enough plays on defense, and it's like, golly, it's 4 different times. Nebraska's what, then a 9-8 win football team last year? I mean, that's so it feels like they're close. I'm just curious how much, like you said, 5-6 wins would be phenomenal and right on schedule for him.
Yeah, and I mean they've got a couple freshmen coming over from the Nashville area, some local guys, so I'm definitely rooting for them this season.
All right,
are y'all in Nashville? Where's this podcast at?
Yeah, Nashville.
Heck yeah, boys, awesome, right down the road.
And the thing that I'll say about Nashville is a lot of people. We had a college hoops analyst come on from like New Rochelle, New York, and we had Ty Richardson come on from Arkansas, and I think me and Ben definitely underrate, what we've got in Nashville, because you get so, fed up with all those girls down on Broadway and everybody, running crazy and all that stuff. But every guest that we've had on is like, man, I love going to Nashville. I love, going to Broadway, and it's really friendly town and all that stuff. So I think we underrate it, but it's definitely fun being here.
Dude, Franklin, not to get too off topic, Franklin is dope.
Yeah,
I know we got Broadway's like crazy, but Franklin is phenomenal.
Yeah, we were just out there. I think it was yesterday. And, it's super cool town, really nice. And it just feels like everything's just right there, right? I mean, we travel through it all the time. If you're going from Nashville to like Murfreesboro and you don't want to take the interstate, take Franklin, really nice drive and all that stuff. So
Heck
they've
yeah,
got a heck of
boys.
a baseball team, I'll tell you that much. But it's definitely a pretty cool town.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. So I sidetracked us there. My bad, boys. But
No,
yeah,
no problem, man.
plug Nashville, plug Franklin, baby.
All right, last question. We're going to move over to Shane Beamer at South Carolina. You know, they've got Spencer Rattler, so as an OU fan, I know him.
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to be able to do something in the East, and could they possibly win?
Man, I think they can. I said this on another video we did. It feels like this year for South Carolina is like establishing whatever like their floor is, if that makes sense. Because like the last couple of years, nobody expected anything from them. Winning 7 games, 8 games the last 2 years was like phenomenal, overachieved. Now it's like, okay, who is South Carolina on a yearly basis? Who is Shane Beamer? I am just fascinated to see if Spencer Rattler can pick up where he left off in 2023. Because, I mean, if they're able to do what they did at the end of the year, going into next year and kind of have it clicking, then, like, absolutely they can make some noise in the East. I probably won't pick them to win it, full transparency. I won't pick them to win the East. No, I mean, just with South Carolina and all that they have coming back with Juice Wells and, like you said, Spencer Rattler. I mean, the one thing with them, too, is, you know, we get to talk a lot about what they have on the roster and a lot about their scheme, but it felt like those last 2 games of the year that they won, the 2 top 10 wins, it was like, man, I just can't account for culture. I can't account for, like, the internal belief they had. Like, there was nothing that should have given anybody a clue to pick them to beat Clemson or beat Tennessee, and we all got hammered for it. But, like, those were double-digit dog kind of games, and they just came out slinging. Like, they put up road to glory numbers against Tennessee and then found a way to get it done at Clemson. And I'm like, dude, this shouldn't be happening. But I can only think that the culture and what Shane Beamer has those guys believing in themselves was the reason they were able to win those games. So, yeah, I mean, I won't pick them, but it wouldn't be the first time that I didn't pick South Carolina and they made me look foolish. So, there we go.
Yeah, well, what I will say is it's always cool to see the transformation of a really good coach and what he can do with the program, right? Nick Saban is probably the best coach of all time, great coach, but he's not what you would call a player's coach, right? I think Shane Beamer is 100% a player's coach. So he's had basically kind of returned the same guys. It's going to be interesting to see what he does with the new class, more people coming into the program, how he's going to relate to those guys. And was it just last year he was able to relate to the guys, they wanted to play for him, or is it going to be a couple guys this year? If he can't get him to play for him, is it just him being a player's coach that makes him successful? And I don't think it is at all, but it'll be definitely something interesting to watch nonetheless. JD, that'll do it. Thank you for joining us, man. Make sure to go check him out on Twitter at J.D Pickell and at On3Sports. On Instagram, it's at J.D Pickell and at On3 College Football. JD, thanks a ton, man. It was a blast.
Boys, y'all are phenomenal what you do. Keep this thing rolling. This is a phenomenal show. Anytime I can come on here, you have me. All right, I appreciate y'all, man.
Awesome.
Thank you
for joining us. Make sure to go check out his show, The Hard Count, and follow his socials. That will do it for episode 39 of the Southern Boy Sports Podcast. Go check out our social media at @so_boy_sports on Twitter, at Southern_boy_sports pod. Leave us a 5-star review if you don't mind. Like and subscribe over on YouTube, and come back for episode 40. Same time, same place next week. See you, boys.